working for you. A weekly talk radio program which highlights developments of national interest and the activities of your St. Kitts Nevis government. Join host Roy Williams as he presents news, views, reports, and interviews about everything regarding the activities of the Team Unity government and the building of our communities and the development of St. Kitts Nevis. Tune in and call in to interact with your government and share your views regarding the upward forward development of your community and our beautiful Twin Island Federation. Working for You is weekly, every Wednesday live from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. on ZIZ Radio, Win FM, and Sugar City FM with rebroadcast on participating stations. Working for You.
Good afternoon and welcome to Working for You. I am Roy Williams. We do apologize for the late start. Today we are going to be talking about comprehensive disaster management. And I have with me two very competent persons from the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. I have with me the new National Disaster Coordinator, Mr. Abdias Samuel, and the veteran, Vesta Southwell, who is the Public Relations Officer at NEMA. Welcome to this program.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you so very much, sir.
The Caribbean, like other regions in the world, is prone to environmental hazards. And from time to time, environmental disasters strike, causing massive damage to infrastructure, loss of life, destruction of crops, and social dislocation of peoples. We can only think of the recent 2017 Atlantic hurricane season that wreaked havoc on several Caribbean islands, putting those countries back in terms of their development, and countries, of course, which are already working with meager budgets. Hurricanes Irma and Maria and their onslaught is still fresh in our minds. Dominica, Puerto Rico, Barbuda, St. Martin, and other Caribbean countries are still reeling from the devastating impact. Just yesterday, an earthquake measuring 7.3 on the Richter scale rattled Trinidad and Venezuela and was felt across several Caribbean islands. The last earthquake of a similar magnitude shook the Martinique region on November 29, 2007. Trinidad and Venezuela suffered infrastructural damage, although reported that it was limited. It is a wake-up call for the Caribbean region, which lies on the Caribbean plate. We remember the 2010 earthquake in Haiti on January 12th that killed, in some, the estimate, over 300,000 persons and caused widespread catastrophic damage in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. On 18th July 1995, the previously dormant Soufriere Hills volcano in Montserrat erupted, destroying its capital city Plymouth, which is now a ghost town and a relic for tourist attraction. It has rendered more than half of Montserrat uninhabitable. These are only a few examples. Mr. Samuel.
Yes, sir.
As the new National Disaster Coordinator, you have been charged with the serious responsibility of coordinating the country's disaster preparedness, its response and recovery.
Yes.
What makes you the man fit for this undertaking?
Very good questions, and let me welcome our listeners live on Facebook, via radio, and all other means of social media, whether home, regionally, and internationally. My name is Abdias Samuel, as stated by Mr. Roy Williams. I have been in the fire department for 19 years. I held the last rank I held was that of the Deputy Fire Chief, responsible for operations. I am not new to NEMA. I have been working with NEMA for years. As a matter of fact, I've been working with NEMA since SIDEMA was called SIDERA then, where we worked on implementing a number of national search and rescue programs, and we look at legislation in that area. Also have been working with worked and trained with the UNDAC, which is the United Nations Disaster Assessment and Coordination Team, where we were prepared to coordinate and assist to any international catastrophe that required such response. I'm also one of the regional trainers in the areas of search and rescue, and that's why this is fitting, because I've been in touch with some of my colleagues from Venezuela, Colombia, because Colombia activated after the earthquake yesterday. In Colombia, we did some studies on the impact of poor building constructions and the types of collapse that happen as a result of these things. My foundation is that of operational capacity, and I think I have the necessary training and capacity to be able to lead the country, which is a privilege and an honor for me to do so.
Okay, good. Now, when we speak about comprehensive disaster management, which is overseen by NEMA,
yes,
what are we talking about?
Comprehensive disaster management means a multi-hazard approach to disaster management. That's why once ago people thought that NEMA was just about hurricanes, and that is what the emphasis is, hurricanes. But look at it, we are in the middle of the hurricane season, sort of approaching the peak. And what happened in our Caribbean region? Earthquake. And guess what? While I was exercising after 6, I received the tsunami threats that was issued for the Caribbean region. So hence, even though we are in the hurricane season, we have to be alert and ready for any eventuality that can harm the very common life, environment, and economy of our country. So comprehensive disaster management speaks to a multi-hazard approach, whether man-made or natural disasters. So we cover everything. A cruise ship is on fire with 5,000-6,000 people on board. It will require bringing all the resources in St. Kitts and Nevis together to deal with that, respond to that situation. If there's volcanic eruption, we have to address the situation. As simple as, is there a pandemic, an epidemic, we have to rise to the occasion. If there is large wildfires, explosions that our communities by large extent is affected, NEMA has to be activated and bring all the country's resources, and if necessary, our regional and international resources to help us bring us back to some form of stability for the continuity of normalcy.
Right. Now, comprehensive disaster management, of which you spoke, which just does not include hurricanes, but
right,
all forms of environmental disasters,
whether natural or man-made.
Natural or man-made,
Great.
must fall under the umbrella of developing environmental awareness. How is the agency involved in helping the nation to develop environmental awareness?
Well, you see, that is important. And that's where you have such a wonderful public relations officer. This is where she comes in, whereby we partner with the relevant agencies. Because you see, that's why NEMA is just a staff of 9 to 10 persons. Our national plan, which we are guided by, brings together all relevant agencies, including environmental health, marine department, environment, and all these particular agencies, and we do studies with these agencies. And these agencies, based on their studies, feasibility studies that they do, they provide us with the data and the information as to the impact of the environment. In particular, something that a lot of people we are talking about is the climate change adaptation. So we gather information, and by gathering information from those relevant agencies and also some of our regional partners, okay, CDEMA also has relations with the International Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction. They do those studies as well with other regional, international partners to provide us information as to how the environment is being impacted by human and also natural events, which are now leading to the increase and intensity of storms and other natural hazards, right? So that is where we get our information from.
So you would say that society and culture sort of create the environment in which we live, or impact the environment in which we live? Or can we say that the environment is really a product of society and culture?
Well, great. That's another key thing that we need to address. Our society. Case in point. Dominica, as a society, influenced by the government, is moving from using plastic to use stop using the use of plastic and styrofoam,
Right.
and using biodegradable material.
Through legislation.
Our culture as well. For example, we have a culture where we just like to dump stuff. We see a gut, and the first instinct for us is to throw it over the gut because nothing is going to happen. And that is where we lead into the mentality of our culture that is not going to happen. As I was speaking here with one of your cameraman, he said we was talking about, Vesta was talking about having Miss Dr. Latchman, it is? Yes, talk about that we should be expecting a large earthquake. However, if I may, your cameraman, he said, oh, that's not going to happen. And that's a cultural mentality that we have in the region, not just St. Kitts Nevis. That is not going to happen. But we have to start to prepare, and that's what NEMA is here for, to prepare the population to respond to any eventuality.
Well, some of the things that I mentioned, in my preamble.
Yes.
We cannot live with our heads in the clouds, or to bury our heads in the sand like the ostrich.
Correct.
And to be totally oblivious, unaware of the environment in which we live.
Yes.
And for people who are thinking something is not going to happen, they may be living in the clouds. But we know that the real possibility of something happening is not fictional.
No.
But it is real.
Real. I mean, that's why at 6.8, between the age ranges of 6.8 to 7.3, as you just mentioned, it's a earthquake of significant magnitude for the Caribbean region.
Yes.
You know how much impact that could have had if it would have probably come closer to other islands.
And if that earthquake
right.
had taken place in a much poorer countries like Haiti, what would have happened? With much more fragile infrastructure
Right.
because
Right.
of the poverty.
Correct. I mean, with some of the images that I saw out of Trinidad, where I saw floors opened up. You see buildings with structural damage to its supports. You understand, Mr. Lesroy Williams, that, as you said, if Haiti, who doesn't have the building standard that we do, would have been struck by such
because that magnitude
was
in Haiti in 2010, 7.3, it wasn't 7.3, I think it was 7.
I think thereabout.
7 or 7.1.
Yes.
And look what it cost.
Yeah. And this was a 7.3, well, 6.8 to 7.3 thereabout.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, something was recorded today again.
They're still having tremors.
They're still having tremors. So you could imagine. So that's why we want our population here in St. Kitts and Nevis to start to begin to prepare and be more proactive to these things. Because let's say if you ask somebody right now, do you have a little plan for that? A family plan, as Vessel love to call it, a family plan.
Right.
They will tell you no. What will the family plan entail? Hey, taking certain actions, knowing where everybody is going to go, having a number of things together for clothing, having some money, some documents, making sure that you do the DCH. For example, one of the things that we were discussing, the deputy and I were discussing today, people spend more time running outside to videotape buildings rather than to take safety precautions.
And they really shouldn't do that.
And
they
they
should
really
stay where
shouldn't do
they
that.
are and look for cover.
And look for cover.
Drop, hold on.
Cover and hold on.
Cover and hold on.
Oh, it's DCH. Drop,
Right.
cover,
Cover,
hold
hold
on.
on.
Right.
Right.
I think they had a song like that.
And we actually have
Yes.
a public service announcement that speaks to that outlines the steps that you should take in our cultural twang, where it's a cartoon image and the person is saying, nobody went outside and say, you feel it, you feel it. That's exactly what we did, what we do in an event of an earthquake. We went outside and asked each other, did you feel it, did you feel it? Instead of taking the necessary precautions. But it's NEMA's position, it's our remit to ensure that persons know what to do in the event of, and we continue to do that.
Now, what guides the action plan of NEMA with respect to managing disasters?
Well, we have what you call a mitigation council. And that mitigation council is one part where all the stakeholders come together.
What guides the mitigation
council?
You have a national...
Yes,
The
we have
national plan.
the national plan. And it's made up of 10 subcommittees. As I tell you before, NEMA is only 9 to 10 people for a population of over 45,000 people. We cannot do it alone. So the plan says, listen, you have 10 subcommittees. And these 10 subcommittees, which are chaired by permanent secretaries,
heads of department.
heads of department.
And there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and these 10 subcommittees are basically the partners that help you execute whatever necessary. And just I was saying, there's a reason for that.
You know, we are in peacetime a secretariat. We are an administrative office. However, in the event that there is an impact of any kind, we transform into not a response agency, but a coordinating agency. And then all of a sudden, those 10 staff members of NEMA becomes upwards of maybe 20 or 30 persons, which you know very well because you are also a member of the committee to which the NDC is speaking.
Yes. In fact, I'm the chair of the media committee.
Education awareness.
Education
Right.
awareness and what's not. Now, this pertains to your Western.
Wow.
What role does public information play in disaster management? And what mechanism is in place for sharing information with the public using multiple platforms at NEMA?
Now, what role does public information play? A very critical role. Communications is one of the more important aspects of comprehensive disaster management. It begins way before an impact. It begins with education and awareness, as we have already established. You are the chairman of the Education Awareness Committee, to which I, as the Public Relations Officer at NEMA, is a member. So we share information once the NEOC, or the National Emergency Operations Center, is activated upon impact, right? We have specific things that we do. We have to ensure that every resident has access to information that tells them what they should do in the event that the impact is affecting their home, the structure of their abode. They must know what steps they can take and how NEMA can assist them in taking those steps. Specifically, for instance, if someone recognizes that their house may not withstand the impact of the hazard, they might want to move to a shelter. What we say in NEMA, we try to advise the public, and again, all of this takes place in our ongoing public education and awareness campaigns. In the event that you're impacted and you need to move quickly, we suggest, as Abdias was alluding to, the creation of a plan that tells you, not by guesswork, because when that wind is blowing and pounding at your door, you don't want to have to try to find out, where can I go? How can I get there? You want to already have a plan in place for you and your family, so that every member of your family knows, in the event that we are impacted, we are first going to go next door by Aunt Jane or whatever. Now, in our current environment, parents are working late night, early morning. Sometimes children are being managed by an older sibling or something in the absence of a parent. Do they know what to do if their parent is not there when the impact is taking place? They must know that they can go somewhere, and the parent must feel confident if they are somewhere else in knowing that my children know where to go. I can, at my earliest convenience, reconvene with them there. How do we share information? I am a woman of a certain age. I have had to embrace every aspect of communications, including social networking, which is easier for persons, for my children. Let's just put it out there exactly the way it is. It's much easier for my children than it is for me, but it is important that I understand how it works and gain assistance if necessary, so that I may be able to share information not only with persons of my age, my generation, but everyone must have equal access to life-saving information. It's not always easy, that's why I'm sure you know that, but we have to do it. If we do not, what will happen?
Yes.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to add to what Miss Southwell was saying, and one of the ambitions I have is to have an all-inclusive approach, meaning we have persons with disabilities, and we want to ensure going forward that we get some professionals to come and do sign language.
Yes.
And be able to reach out also to our non-English speaking communities.
Yes.
So those are some of the ambitions I have to ensure, as Vesta said, we get that all-inclusive approach to all our citizens being informed.
Now, we are midway into the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season. Thank God we have not had any hurricane.
And may it continue.
And may it continue.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What can you tell the audience about the forecast for this year's season? And how has the agency been involved in preparing for any eventuality?
Okay. At present, we have received information from the Met office here in St. Kitts. I believe Mr. Elmo Boak met with me, a senior Met officer, and informed me that the hurricane season has been downgraded to an average, average hurricane season with 9 to 13 storms, named storms. We have 4 to 7 of those storms that should become hurricanes, and out of those 4 to 7 hurricanes, about 2 of those should become major hurricanes. Thank God we're not like Hawaii right now. Hawaii is in a position right now. They are preparing for Hurricane Lane, who should be impacted them sometime in a few hours. So far, we have not had any major threat. However, on taking up my duties in the first week of July, I was blessed by a burial. Burial ensured that I get my feet wet. So that kind of led us into a form of preparation, because the projected path of this storm was St. Kitts and Nevis. It was right in the path. What we have been doing, for example, we have been having a number of meetings. We have met with the volunteers, the district managers. We have met with a number of stakeholders. For example, we have met with ZIZ, the chairman of ZIZ, because we want to increase the communications. We have met with Public Works and visited the guts, because that's one of the interests of people have concerns, to ensure that the guts are deep and wide enough and they don't overflow the banks, and the flow of water is somewhat seamless all the way to the sea. And we don't have that situation that occurs frequently at College Street Gut and Westbourne Gut. We have been doing that. We have been also carrying a number of public awareness campaigns to ensure that the public start to prepare for the season, and in particular now, Lesroy, for the peak of the hurricane season, because we're now approaching that peak between mid to end August to middle of September, to the ending of September, thereabout. Yeah, that's where the climax, that's where the instability of that hurricane alley between the west coast of Africa to the Caribbean that's when it start to get somewhat unstable and create the nice environment for the hurricanes to
September.
perform. Yeah, between the
Mid-August.
Mid-August,
Yeah.
to
September.
September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when it's most likely
Likely.
Most likely.
that a hurricane would
Will be
develop
formed,
and,
yeah.
and impact.
Yes.
Now, earlier you spoke, Vester, about in passing, about the National Emergency Operating Center. Now, tell us what that is and how is it activated?
Well, if there is an impact or a threat of an impact, the National Emergency Operations Center, or the NEOC, on Nevis it is the EOC, is activated by the Honorable Prime Minister upon advice from the Mitigation Council Chair, who is the Deputy Prime Minister, Honorable Sean Richards, as well as the National Disaster Coordinator. He receives the information and the determination is made to activate. What does that mean? On the bottom line, it means that all staff has to report to NEMA and stay there until we have concluded the management of the impact. But that includes not just staff, but the permanent secretaries, the chairpersons of those 10 subcommittees that Abdias had alluded to. They cover relief and supplies, foreign affairs. Every aspect of comprehensive disaster management is represented in the NEOC, so that in the event, even some private sector persons, agencies are represented there, like SCELEC,
Yes.
the telecommunications service providers, and those sorts of things. So they are there in the event that something happens. We receive a call, and as I said earlier, the nature of the agency transforms from an administrative office to an operations office. So we change numbers, we share the numbers widely, and so persons who may be having challenges, either in their homes trying to get out to get to safe haven, or any other challenge. Like we received calls, for instance, last year when we did activate twice last year. We received calls, for instance, from persons who would have observed fire getting lighted on the lamp poles and that sort of thing, and having the person from SCELEC in the NEOC at the time when we received that call allows us to take action immediately. So it's not by accident that this grouping was put together. There is a comprehensive nature to it, and it really works well once it is applied.
Now, in the event of a storm or a hurricane, some persons, of course, whose homes are not as sturdy, or whose homes become affected, may have to take safe haven,
Yeah.
to use the word that you use, and basically we call shelters, to go to shelters.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit in terms of how those shelters are managed?
Well, the shelters, first of all, are selected through a process that is guided by the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture. He is the chairperson of that committee, the Housing and Shelter Committee. However, Mr. G. Knight is currently in position as a convener, as he likes to call himself, of the committee. So it comprises membership from NEMA, I think the district volunteer pool, social and development, and some other agencies possibly. They go around and select facilities with the intention of having them listed as a shelter. And these are not hurricane shelters, I want to tell persons, they are emergency shelters. So in the event of a hazard impact, whether it be a hurricane or some other impact that plunges our federation into disaster mode, the same shelters would be used. So they are not unique to just hurricanes. And following that, once the shelters are opened, now last year the chairman of the Mitigation Council, the Deputy Prime Minister, took a unique position to pre-open shelters, to open shelters pre-impact. And so every district had a primary shelter open because of the nature of the threat. we were told that this storm was rapidly increasing in wind speed and so on, and it was approaching Category 5, which is catastrophic. So he found it necessary. He thought that saving lives and protecting persons was the ultimate, and we pre-opened some shelters in all the districts, as I've said. Those shelters have to be manned by a team of persons led by a shelter manager who are trained in shelter management. Our district volunteers and officers at the Ministry of Social Development have also that capacity to manage shelters, because it takes a unique set of skills in order to manage them. Not everybody is cut for that type of arrangement, I have to say, because it requires much from us all, and not everybody is. You might be willing, but you might not understand how far you would have to go in order to manage a shelter. So primarily it's the district volunteers in collaboration with social development, those persons, but they have a team, as I have said. It's not just a shelter manager. They would want to have included in that team someone to provide psychosocial support. There are other persons who might have a medical background. Sometimes nurses form part of that group and that sort of thing. And when you're housing persons, families and so on, you have to be responsible in the decisions that you would take while you're housing them. You have to take care of them and keep them safe while there. So it's not an easy task. Thankfully, there are many persons within our federation who give up their time willingly to do this type of work.
What criteria is used to identify a shelter? Because, I mean, you don't want people leaving and saying they're going to a place where there's a safe haven, which really is no safe haven, and where the conditions are really not conducive to that of a safe haven.
Right.
So what's the criteria?
Before Mr. Samuel addresses the criteria for the shelter selections, I just want to say that that is a difficulty that we have had over the years. From time to time we have produced a shelter list, and persons would have questioned, why is it so late? Because we have to take time to ensure that the just as you have said, that the facility is conducive to that type of residency, that persons are safe. And there can be safe haven depending on the hazard that is impacting. There's safe haven for one hazard and maybe not for another, you know, so we have to be mindful of the selection of these facilities. Beyond that, I would yield to Mr. Samuel.
Yeah, you were doing well. But some of the criteria, that's why that will be required, for example, is the size of the facility, the accessibility in terms of like windows, doors, because there's a formula that is used to somewhat guesstimate, I got to put it that way, the capacity that will be hold. Does it have some basic essentials like bathroom, showers? Does it have a kitchenette where persons may be able to cook? And a number of things like that. That is what gives us the criteria. Also, for example, the location of the shelter. Is it located in an area that is vulnerable? So these are some of the criteria for selection of shelters.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, is there anyone who is barred from going into a shelter?
Yes. Let's say, according to the shelter policy, there's a shelter policy that exists in draft at the moment, but is what we will use. Persons with things like communicable diseases. This has sparked a debate. But persons with communicable diseases. The shelter policy also addresses, like for example, somebody with red eye, because you got to look at the greater good for the greatest number. So we will have to find somewhere for that person to be, right? Also, animals, pets. We have asked persons for pets to find somewhere for the pet to be housed. You can't bring that pet to the shelter because, you know,
persons may have
allergies. So these are some of the things that the shelter policy speaks to.
Okay.
Right.
Also, I would imagine that persons of perceived ill character and so on, because again, because you may be responsible for the safety and security of the
Ill
shelterees.
character.
Ill character.
Yes.
Okay, could you
now-
define that?
I was. You couldn't let it slide.
slide.
Okay. One of the things in a presentation recently, we had a discussion about the capacity for the shelter managers to recognize who would have a communicable disease. You can't necessarily look at someone and say
Right,
that
right.
they have something that you have to, protect others from. So this brings us back to one of the functions of the NEOC.
Is that what you meant by ill character? That's what
No.
I'm trying to find out.
No, but
Because not because
okay.
you're ill means you don't have an ill character.
Right.
no. But I was referring to what might be deemed as undesirables in a setting that has other persons.
People who are displayed antisocial behavior,
Perhaps. Now, mind you, that might just be something that
or
might
somebody who wants to smoke his or her weed or something like that. What I don't know. What
but-
Persons might enter shelters with weapons, Sometimes people, in some extreme cases,
So what security measures are there in place?
And that is part of the whole
security is part of the team.
A security is part of the team. Each shelter should have a security. So, as Vesta said earlier, that part of the grouping that makes up that shelter management team, a police or maybe a soldier,
Right.
might be
Or
assigned,
both.
or both, might be assigned to
The
perform
shelter.
security in these shelters. So they will have that form of control, because persons can get angry and become somewhat agitated, frustrated, and things may happen.
And that underscores the importance of psychosocial support as
Support,
well. We
right.
tend sometimes to put that on the back burner, like it's not so important. However, we do not necessarily know how we will react once we feel threatened, even if it's by a hazard.
Right. So you would have, for example, some medical personnel at the centers.
Yes, nurse.
Because
Right.
psychosocial, of course, people might be suffering with mental issues,
Right.
depression,
Right.
and other forms
Right.
of, because people are socially dislocated.
Right.
It may weigh heavily upon them.
And even if they don't suffer from these types of things in advance of an impact, sometimes the
stress.
impact itself
The
brings
stress.
on
Brings on
that.
that.
We
Right.
never, you may not know. I remember last year while we were at NEMA, many of us, after a few days, were becoming irritable, and everybody thought
Tell
it was
me
just.
about it. I was there too.
So we discussed that even then. I think you were saying that at one point upstairs.
believe it.
Yeah, that we could have used some support, because really and truly we left our families and we came there. And with a willing spirit, and we did our best, but after a few days, many persons wanted to go home. Now, we didn't, but we wanted to go home. We were missing our families. Some of us, our families were suffering as well, having been impacted by the systems, and we could not leave to go and assist them. So that was sort of something that I know that we discussed at that time. You never know how you're going to react once you're pushed into that sort of mode, that you just have to be going, assisting communities and seemingly being left out in the cold. So, yeah.
Okay. Now, what have been...
That's why, sorry. If
You
you
wanted to mention something, go
yeah.
right ahead, sir.
One of the things, while we're on shelter, one of the things I want to encourage the general public who is listening is that we promote something called the body system. What do I mean by the body system? Meaning being our brother's keepers. Meaning that maybe I can go to my neighbor's house and shelter with my neighbor.
Yes.
Right,
Providing
because
that you and your neighbor get
neighbor
along.
get along,
But people do get
but
along in
yes.
disasters.
Yeah,
really.
when it comes to disasters, trust me, most
It brings
times
people
do
together.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it has some good
Some
to
good.
it.
So that is something that we promote highly. And I want the general public to start to adopt and not wait so much and the government to provide so much. Because also, it may bring a level of comfort to you than going to actual shelters.
Right.
Because sometimes shelters come with a stigma. People in our culture. But people now are starting to become more and more aware of the relief that the shelter brings. But we want to promote and encourage the body system.
And remember, this is not
Yes.
something that we expect you to do when that storm is brewing outside.
Right.
Again, back to the family plan, you would have determined in a a comfortable environment, in peacetime, like we say, when there's no wind and rain and that's thunder and lightning, you can decide at that point, who will we go by in the event of? And let every member of your family know this is where we would go if something happens to our house. So that it's not something you have to be struggling with while an impact is going on.
Certainly. Now, what have been some of the lessons learned from the 2017 Atlantic hurricane season? And what plans are in place to strengthen what didn't go so well and to improve on what went well?
Right.
And one of the things that I have learned, because communications is one of the first things that go down during an impact. The cell phone towers go down and that sort of thing. We, as Abdi had referred to earlier, are in partnership with the chairman here at ZBC, and he has pledged support in a number of new initiatives, including a broadcast room that is being prepared at the NEMA that will allow us to go straight to the public and provide alert and other messaging information. However, with a little dip through ZIZ, of course, because we are not a true radio station. So we're working closely with the chairman on that. We are assisting in some of the initiatives at ZIZ as well, in terms of gaining some generators so that some of the towers that may have gone down before might have a better chance, as well as we've been promoting that they reinstitute the AM band, which I'm sure Abdias could speak more on.
Right. Well, that's why from having discussions with my deputy and staff, also, I would just like to add to what Vesta just said. Communication, one of the challenges that happened last year, I experienced it being in Nevis, working in the EOC Nevis. Sorry, I mean not the NEOC. No. The EOC in Nevis is that the dissemination of wrong information, as we're calling it right now, fake news
and a Trump.
What happens is that persons out there maliciously sending out information that creating havoc and panic.
Yeah.
And that is something that we are asking the general public to, and persons, perpetrators, to please stop doing it. It's not good for the country. It's not even good for us at NEMA. It puts us in predicaments. We keep championing to people, please pay attention to the relevant authority. Do not act on just any information. If needs be, call NEMA. Call the Met Office. Those are competent authorities, relevant authorities, to provide you with adequate and more accurate information. Also, one of the things that came out of the discussions as well was that we were reactive somewhat last year after the first storm. Is after the first storm, hurricane passed, Irma, that persons realized the seriousness of these things, and then they reacted different.
Yeah.
So we don't want people to react that way no more. We're asking you, look, be proactive, stay alert, be informed. And then when it's time to act, and NEMA must give you directives and advices, please act and don't wait. Right? So those are some of the challenges that I think that we faced last year. And also, persons can use shelters. As I say, I love the body system, but can use shelters. Don't be afraid, there's no stigma to shelters. Right? So we are encouraging people to prepare themselves. That's right.
One thing that Abdi said, speaking about the fake news, it's not only in St. Kitts this happens, doesn't make it better or easier to swallow. But I was reading this morning that the UE seismic unit, they provided some information saying a disclaimer of sorts. No one can predict earthquakes. Why? Because there is something going around talking about predictions of earthquakes coming. And when you're in a vulnerable state, you tend to try to latch on to anything, and with the hope that it might assist you in being safe. They are also putting something out about a incorrect information regarding a tsunami threat. This morning I'm speaking about, because there would have been something different yesterday. Right. So it happens throughout the world, not just in St. Kitts and Nevis. However, there is no excuse for us to listen to these things. I mean, I myself...
Because all they do is that they create panic.
They create panic.
And
they minimize the
pandemonium
impact.
and unnecessary stress.
Right, they
Correct.
also minimize the impact that we might have, because then persons would say, man, nothing happened with that, so why should I listen to them? You know, nothing can happen, as our good camera person said this morning. What we're trying to tell people is there are things that you can look for so that you could you could be confident that the information is coming from the relevant authority. For instance, at NEMA, we have a jingle that we use. We have a signature. Either the National Disaster Coordinator or the deputy would sign off on a PDF document, which is more difficult for you to copy and paste and change for malicious reasons. So we have certain steps that we take to ensure that once you receive information from NEMA, that it is correct information and that you can be assured of that. But you also have a responsibility to yourself to ensure that you're getting the right information from the relevant source, and refrain from sharing information that you know is questionable. Because someone sent me a note about some heat wave and something, and I looked at it and I immediately said, one of the things we don't seem to understand, when you send these malicious things out, sometimes there is a virus embedded in it. So don't share it with me to ask me if it's authentic. If it is authentic, there will be some semblance of NEMA included in the document. Last year, I used to have to send stuff to Bradley here at ZIZ and say, Bradley, put this together for me, because I didn't have the capacity to edit the message and the jingle. But I sent it to him or GQ. It was done, sent back to me, and sent out from ZIZ. We will do anything and everything that we can to ensure that you get the correct messaging, the alert messaging that relates to you directly and to the safety of you and your loved ones.
Now, you mentioned, and we've talked about it, it has come up, earthquake, tsunami.
Yes.
What is NEMA doing to make the country ready in the eventuality of an earthquake or a tsunami?
That's why
No.
Since it is a real threat.
it is a real threat. I mean, yesterday afternoon, when I received the call from Police Telecom, who is our focal point for the tsunami alerts and warnings, it was somewhat surreal. I was actually exercising up in the mountain when I got the call. But because I looked for certain key information from within it, that is what led my reaction. What is St. Kitts and Nevis doing? Well, I think last year we achieved tsunami-ready capacity. Right? What that means, that's right, is that St. Kitts and Nevis has the basic essential infrastructure in place to be able to minimize the impact to our society, our people, in terms if we are threatened by a tsunami. For example, you will see that we have placed some signs all around the island. We have what you call an inundation map, and we want to thank all those who played a great role in getting that done. In particular, physical planning and our other stakeholders from overseas. And the inundation map tells us, listen, based on a 100 meter wave, this is how far inland this wave can go and the areas that will be affected. And hence we have also identified assembly areas where persons can go as a safe haven if we are threatened by any tsunami. Okay, these are some of the things, and also we have been carrying out a strong awareness campaign on tsunamis. You see us, we have been handing out flyers. When we do presentation, we give flyers. We have posters that are posted all over the place. Every month, I think it's every Thursday the last Thursday in every month, we have a tsunami warning, a message alert that is a practice, a test. That is done. It comes to the police force. The police disseminated to NEMA and all the other police stations and so on, because there's a tsunami protocol, alerting protocol. If we are under threat, the police stations, the fire stations and so on, with their sirens and bullhorns, will go around the community with the areas that are going to be greatly impacted, notify people so that they can move to higher grounds. Right. So all these things NEMA has been doing, and we have an annual exercise that we have adopted called the Carib Wave. And this exercise, you will see sometimes we choose areas that we want to test, and we carry out this exercise in March, I think it's
Yes,
in
it's on
March.
March, yeah.
In March, they're about.
Don't want to say
Until-
when because we like to surprise
Some
persons.
persons. But sometime in March, with April, they're about. That's right. And this exercise basically tests these mechanisms, these
Right.
protocols. So we have been doing a lot of things in terms of getting ourselves ready.
And
yes.
one of the things.
Because the whole goal
Yes.
is to reduce the impact,
Yes.
disaster mitigation,
Loss of lives,
Yes.
the loss of lives and so on.
Yes. Yes.
Because things will happen.
Yes. We can't
There will
protect
be
ourselves.
impact,
Yes.
but it is to reduce it.
To
It's the
reduce it.
risk management.
Risk
Right,
management.
right.
I was just about to say risk management.
And the maps, what the maps have allowed us to identify is some critical areas around the island, and the maps were created for Nevis as well. There's one of the island of Nevis and one of Charlestown, one of St. Kitts and one of Bastia. Every schoolboy knows that Bastia is below sea level. What the maps have allowed us to identify is areas that may become completely inundated in the event of a 100-foot wave. And so we can now plan for an impact based upon the design of the maps. One of the concerns I have constantly is Abdias has said that we had an aggressive CDM campaign, comprehensive disaster management campaign, going around the island, specifically in community centers, and speaking to communities about this threat. And we started, I think, in Old Road. 3 people came. We went around the island. We had scarce attendance. People are not interested in coming out to listen to this type of thing. However, when the sky suddenly gets dark, we get a great increase in calls at NEMA. What's going on? What happening in the atmosphere? Something coming? We are trying to say, before these things happen, you need to understand how you need to respond. What are the resources that you we would say you're required to have on hand? And we have that information. However, if you don't make yourself available to us, we cannot share it and we cannot protect you.
Certainly.
You have to take some sort of onus for your own safety and security as well, in collaboration with the government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis. We cannot do it alone. So we want persons to come out when we heed the call. I remember we went around doing these presentations. Grammy Brown was on the campaign with us from the Department of Physical Planning, and he had a presentation that I'm telling you, we did it on ZIZ as well, on TV. And when we did it, the calls were sort of like 1 and 2 in the beginning of the conversation. And the minute that he put the map up there and started showing what would happen to Sandy Point in the event of, people from everywhere, the phones never stopped ringing. Oh, what would happen? I live here. And we were trying to share the information. We couldn't keep up. So we determined we'll come out to where you are. Just come and take a listen. We will show you. We were able to show even churches. We did it at churches. We did it at the Central Bank. I mean, we had a really campaign going. And it's not completed. But we want persons to understand we have information that we can share with you, that you can use to protect yourself and your family. It's all about risk management, reduction of impact, mitigation, all of these things. That sound like big fancy words. It simply means knowing what to do when.
Yes, and that's why, and it's a good thing that you talk about earthquake and tsunami, because just this week I had an interesting, informative week. The seismic team that is here from UWI, they are here basically doing some work on our monitors. We have sensors here that monitor all our seismic activity in St. Kitts and Nevis. We have them both in St. Kitts and we have them in Nevis as well. And they were here doing some repairs because I said to them, listen, we pay subscription to these things, and I want them to make sure. I want to make sure that we have these warning systems. Well, let me say information gathering items for us to be able to be better prepared and plan, as Vesta just said. And our monitors, I want to assure the general public that we have these things working. The guys they should be back, because I made a strong demand on them that they need these things to be highly functional and operational, because the people of St. Kitts of Nevis are demanding that the NEMA have the necessary infrastructure in place to keep them ready and prepared for any eventuality as it regards seismic activity.
And you know, I have to mention that we've been doing this for a number of years. I think we missed one or two, but again, in partnership with UE Seismic Research Center, we've been doing a campaign, a tsunami readiness campaign within the schools. Now, some of our greatest partners are primary school students. They are the ones who carry the message best. They go home, they make their parents feel guilty when they're doing things wrong to the environment and that sort of thing. So we rely heavily on them for carrying the message. And we conduct this campaign, like I've said, in collaboration with UE Seismic. Every year, there's one being planned currently for October, I think the first week in October, where Dr. Latchman herself may be the person who comes as part of the team. I'm not certain if she's going to come. But we've had a partnership with, as I said, ongoing, where we get to do an interview with her on, as I said, TV persons call in, and she is a wealth of information. I mean, off the top of her head, she just speaks seismic activity. While she's doing her rounds with the officials, trying to speak with government ministers and that sort of thing, in terms of being ready for an impact, we go with the education team from UE around the island to the schools, and we start interacting with them, sharing information. They come with flyers, they come with games, all of the tools they leave with us. And we have continued this process for many years. Sometimes people don't hear it, and so they forget it.
Well, on that note, we're going to go to the phone lines
Sure, no problem.
and to hear from the people. So you can now put your headphones on. The overseas number is 1718-577-2916. That is 1718-577-2916. And the local number is 465-2555. 465-2555. We await your calls. There's no one on the line at the moment, so we would continue our discussion. Now, coastal villages are some of the hardest hit during hurricanes. What advice would you have? There's someone on the line. Working for you, good afternoon.
Oh, blessed good afternoon.
Yes, a blessed good afternoon to
Good
you too.
afternoon.
I'm calling in regards to ham radio operators. Are they involved in your NEMA package?
Yes, Carlo. Good afternoon. Yes, the ham radio operators are part of our mitigation council, and they also are part of the National Emergency Operations Center. As a matter of fact, they are the ones who we turn over the radio operations to when the NEOC is activated, and any other challenges with radio and so on. They are the ones who provide technical assistance and advice to NEMA when necessary. So yes, they are an active element of the whole disaster response cycle and preparedness.
And as a matter of fact, I remember last year that they were instrumental in assisting some of the persons who were trying to get information on family members and so on in Dominica and other islands, not necessarily St. Kitts, so they were able to provide assistance.
Okay, let's pause. We have another caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
President, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, y'all doing a great job. But my question is, right, I have noticed for many years the public would hear about the shelters when a storm is approaching, right? And season starting the 1st of June. What is the policy of and when the citizens should know when where is the shelter in the area? Thanks for.
Yes. Thank you, Carlo, for an interesting call. And
Another
question.
caller.
Oh, sorry.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
In case you are doing a drill, a map drill in terms of a disaster, and the public is not partaking in it, is there any laws governing such thing that there's a penalty can placed on anybody who has refused to take part in it? Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo.
Do you know of any laws? I don't know of any laws, but I'm not disinclined to agree that maybe there should be some. Last year, I know that when we were conducting the Carib Wave, it took place at the industrial site for a reason, because on any given day there are thousands of persons inhabiting that site, and some of the service providers in the area declined to participate. We had no way of forcing them to do so. They are on a daily basis responsible for quite a number of employees, and so we thought that they would have signed on to it. Some of the managers of some businesses in the industrial site that employed lots and lots of persons refused to partner with us. So perhaps that's something that can be taken on board from the NEMA.
Yeah, with the caller who's called about the posting of the shelter list.
Yeah.
I just want to let a caller know that there are several activities according to the guidelines, the Housing and Shelter Community Guidelines, that governs that. For example, I can tell you, Lesroy, that in February, a number of inspections are carried out to ensure that the structures that are identified for shelters are inspected and are basically good in basic terms for habitation. By the end of March, basically, all this has to be completed. So by ending of May into June, just before the hurricane season starts, the shelter list is already sent to Cabinet. Cabinet is the one who has to approve, and then it's posted somewhere between the ending of May to the beginning of June. However, sometimes, like anything else, we may encounter challenges, and our district people, who are our eyes and ears on the ground, may say, listen, after consultation, these shelters, or sometimes the community centers, are used, and they identify that there is a problem after the list has been created. So NEMA will now have to make an intervention and rescind the list, and then to review it again, to then send it to Cabinet again to ensure that all stakeholders are satisfied. And after satisfaction of everybody and Cabinet's approval, we then post this list.
Right.
I must say, and I won't be afraid to say, that this year we've had some challenges, and we have been rectified. The list is before Cabinet for urgent attention so that we could actually get them. However, that doesn't say, Lesroy, that they cannot be used. Okay? It doesn't say they cannot be used. If we have an approaching storm or an emergency, the identified shelters will be used to house anybody. Okay? Yes.
Now, we were talking about coastal villages, that they're some of the hardest hit during hurricanes. And what would be your advice to people living in coastal villages, risky areas, with respect to hurricanes and, of course, tsunamis?
Yeah.
There's another caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, sir.
And good afternoon to the good people here from NEMA.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, there's a question.
Yes.
Now, if we got a major tsunami or hurricane and something happened, like an earthquake, and people like in a trap, NEMA will have sufficient body forces that to come and assist the people.
Yes.
If it's an organization, if anybody want to come join, they could come join. You know?
Okay. Okay.
So I just want to find out that, you know, that if anything, I'm an individual, if I want to come join NEMA, if I could come join NEMA.
Would you like to volunteer?
I do have that question that I haven't asked yet.
Okay.
Would you like to volunteer?
You come as a voluntary, so something of a voluntary work.
Yes. So, Carla, I would invite you. See, right now, I'm gonna invite you right now to come to either ZIZ right now or go to NEMA right now. We need you. Fill out a form. The form will be processed and filtered, and then we will get back to you so you could start volunteer. We could take you through our orientation process, and then you can start volunteering.
I think about 3 years ago. About 3 or 4 years ago, I did come into some meeting, but I don't know. But to the night work and so I was doing night work. I was working in hotel and busy and so.
Yes.
I never get to follow up.
Come back. We need you.
I was in a meeting and so with them. I was coming to the meeting and so.
So come on back. Continue going to the meetings. Maybe I will meet you sometime. Identify yourself to me sometime and say you are the gentleman who spoke about this. And we will welcome you with open arms. We need all the help that we can.
Okay, no problem. You are doing a wonderful job as far as I concerned.
Thank you, sir.
And I wish that you all could go from strength to strength.
Thank you.
That when a major disaster comes, that you all have sufficient forces to control whatever.
Yes,
you
sir.
all have a wonderful day.
You too. And we need you, so come back.
All right, no problem.
Good.
Speak about the
Yes.
search and rescue.
That's why we have search and rescue capacity. We have the clearance search and rescue committee, as you are aware, and that committee comprises of the fire department, the defense force, and the police force, the EMTs as well. And these trained personnel will go out there and perform any search and rescue operations. And if needs be, we have regional mechanisms that will come and respond and assist us through RSS and other CDMA and otherwise.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Mr. Williams, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to put Mr. Samuel on the spot. My name is Austin Coker. He knows
Austin.
me well.
Yes, sir.
I called a few days ago and I mentioned about task group. And you did answer the question and you answered correct.
Yes, sir.
But I missed part of my question that I wanted to ask. These groups that you all having the different areas, do any of the group have any medical personnel attached to it? In the event you have a problem and you have shuttings who are reliable on insulin and stuff like that, where the health centers may not be open, do you have a medical trained person, whether a nurse, whoever the person is, who can go to that home and administer that insulin to that person who cannot make it to the health center because they are closed of the hurricane? That's one.
Okay.
Two, Mr. Samuel,
yes, sir.
Since you took over NEMA,
yes,
I strongly believe if you don't have, you all need to get at least maybe 2 or 3 ATV bicycles. It may sound like a joke now, but when you have roadblock, sometimes it's only the 4-wheeler, these kind of small little bike can maneuver through. Let me use Old Road Bay. Last year when the road get damaged, no vehicle could have passed. Only the ATV, because they are all-terrain vehicle can just pass over. Suppose you have to get to somebody to get them back from one end of the road to the next to get to the ambulance. How you all deal with those kind of stuff?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Coker. I'll answer you just now. Yes.
Okay. We were talking about, before the previous caller,
Yes.
we were talking about volunteerism.
Yes.
And I know that you have the Comprehensive Disaster Management Youth Ambassadors, or the CDM.
Yes.
Yes.
And that they have been actively engaged.
Right.
And recently, they left the Federation to do some volunteer work. Vesta, can you tell us some more about this group in particular? And the role for volunteerism in general in disaster management?
Well, volunteerism in disaster management is critical, as even in our case where Abdias has said that we have a small staff, but in wartime we go to an extensive staff. That includes the volunteers and the stakeholders and so on. We depend heavily upon them. The gentleman who asked the question last was asking something about going into communities and getting to know the makeup of households and that sort of thing. One of the roles of the district NEMA district volunteers is that they have to have, at a glance, an understanding of who comprises the communities that they serve.
Yes.
They must know what the membership of every household is. It makes no sense otherwise. So in the event of an impact, they ought to know. I mean, for instance, in the hurricane season, when we get advance warning, the storm doesn't just come and plop upon us. We'll get warning is how many hours away or whatever, how many miles away. Persons have a little time to start preparing. And what the NEMA district volunteers do with that time is they go house to house at times, do a walkthrough, they call it, to get information from every household. What are your needs currently? What can potentially be your needs upon impact? That includes that there are persons who are on life-saving medicines or long-term medications, and if they have enough medications on the person, whether they need assistance in gaining more, or if they have eyes to keep them cold in terms of insulin and that sort of stuff. So it's not about whether there is a nurse or a doctor on the team necessarily, and there might be, but that's not necessarily what is critical for them to understand what their role must be. They must understand before impact who makes up their community, and they must have a plan in place for reaching those persons to provide assistance. The SK and CDM Youth Ambassadors is a group of young persons, 18 to 35, I believe, and this group came about following a meeting. Two young ladies, Joanne Davis and Shajune Gums, came to the NEMA one day. They were going to be graduating from the CFBC and inquired how they can participate in disaster management. They had that interest, and we engaged them in conversations, and I think even extended some training to one or both of them at the time. We never imagined, or at least I never imagined, that the group would grow so exponentially, that it would be, that the members would be invited, for instance, to the BVI to engage in some rehabilitation and recovery efforts there. What had happened, I am told, is that in the BVI, the volunteers were extremely exhausted. They have been going for since last year, because we were wondering how come they want persons to come in to assist, and the volunteers here. This is a tiring sort of work that we do. So the group, there was a collaboration made between the Deputy Disaster Coordinator and disaster management official, Evangeline Innis, who used to work at CDMA in the past as a trainer. They had a conversation at some point, and arrangements were made for the group to go down. They were all enthusiastic about traveling to do this work, and every single one of them contributed 200%. We are thankful to the commander of the Defense Force, Commander Comrie, for his assistance, because they traveled to the BVI on the stalwart, brave young little people there, through the station channel, but they went willingly, as I've said, and they engaged in a week-long exercise. They were able to meet with the premier there and had a useful conversation with him, as well as the Minister of Education, who I am told might be the next premier of the Tortola. So they made some valuable connections while there, and I myself have seen a little transformation in all of them upon their return. Of course, you assisted us by allowing someone from representative from SKNIS to come and to record their departure. The Honorable Prime Minister, we are very thankful, joined us to say farewell to the young persons. Mrs. Langley Stevens, who is the deputy who initiated the project, was off on holiday at the time, and the National Disaster Coordinator ably supported as well. So we feel extremely proud of them every single day. Of course, I have to mention assistance from LeJean James, who is our IT technician at NEMA. He also went along on the trip and was able to send me back recordings and pictures every day. So I was able to post those on the Facebook page and so on. And that's NEMA SKN for anyone who doesn't know it as yet. Please join us on NEMA SKN on Facebook. It's normally updated quite every single day. I update it, in fact, and with weather information and anything that is critically important for CDM. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak about the group.
Certainly. And before Mr. Samuel answers that caller, if you could speak to the residents of coastal villages. I've been trying to ask that.
I know, I know.
Yes, yes. Okay. Okay. Well, those are what we identify as vulnerable areas. Highly vulnerable areas, because you know the storm surges that comes as a result of tropical storms or any storm whatsoever, and we can only advise persons to seek shelter or to move from that area in times of threats or impending impact. Persons have come to me and asked me, oh, you don't have powers to demolish the building or make them move or force them to move. I think there's the relevant authority to deal with that. And we only can engage in dialogue with those authority based on the data that we may collect from studies conducted by our partners that we may bring in to do vulnerability assessments. And they will then, that's right, advise the government as to what measures the government should take to address that situation. I remember being in the fire department in Sandy Point, working many years in Sandy Point. And there are areas in that district where persons live right on the sea. I won't mention. And every year, you will have to somewhat sensitize these people. Listen, you are vulnerable. And they're telling you they're not moving. You understand?
Until something moves them.
It moved them. No, let me just bring it a little closer. In Nevis last year, that's where I was. What we actually did is advise the Premier to walk with us to a particular area. And the Premier actually did come walk with us and encourage the people to move and go seek shelters because it was right on the coastline. What that did for us, that's one of the things that we saw last year in Nevis for my 10 years that I've been in Nevis, is that that's why shelters were occupied like never before last year, right? So for that in that area, we can only advise people, show them the dangers and the impact what a storm can have or whatever. However, the competent authority, we do engage them, we talk with them, and we share whatever data is shared with us with them in terms of vulnerability assessments that are being done in St. Kitts and Nevis.
You want to address the caller? I think they made some recommendations.
Right. One of the callers, Mr. Coker, my former colleague at the fire department there in Old Road, he spoke about the shut-ins. I think Vesta addressed that already. The ATV bicycles that he said we should acquire is not everything. NEMA budget is a very small budget. We may not be able. So, Austin, if you're listening, what you can do is be a good volunteer with NEMA. And as a great businessman that you are, and I know you have possession of these ATVs, if you can partner with us as a stakeholder and make them available to us so that we can use them in times of impact or post-impact, we welcome it. You know, I welcome it. Vesta, you welcome it, correct?
I do.
And come and have a conversation and dialogue with me so that we could see how best we can basically make you a part of the whole mechanism.
Right. I know that Red Cross, that international multi-agency, plays a great role. Humanitarian assistance, which is so important in the event of disasters. Now, what are some of the regional disaster agencies that NEMA collaborates with?
Well, I'm going to speak to one of the main agencies that we collaborate with. Well, several, but I cannot leave out after. If I leave them out, they're gonna fire me. But in SDIMA, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, is basically the mother of all disaster management agencies for CARICOM participating states. Okay, they are the one that coordinate all the reliefs or training and everything else for all the disasters offices within the 21 CARICOM member states, right?
Yes.
We also work along with USAID OFDA. That's like the FEMA international branch of the United States that does development in the Caribbean region. We also work with UNDP.
USAID OFDA recognized Abdia Samuel, our new NDC, as their best trainer in...
I was hoping that you won't mention it.
hazardous chemicals.
Yes, hazardous
He
materials.
is their best trainer. This is what the USAID officer said in a meeting here in St. Kitts, and they were not trying to be his friend when they said it. It was, truly what they had believed and assessed him to be. So,
Right.
we're in good hands.
Yeah. So the UNDP also, we also, they are part of our partners. US Southcom.
And we also we connect
Right, so-
with the regional disaster offices as well, as
right.
Abdias would have said. And he not only trains, I want person to know, he does not only train persons in these disciplines in St. Kitts and Nevis. They call upon him to go wherever the training is necessary. That's why you said when you were referring to that question that you kept bringing back about the vulnerable areas and so on, the coastlines. I'm inclined to believe that it's time for us as Caribbean people to stop allowing building in those areas. I will say that. I won't go too much into that because it's not only that you put the persons at risk, but you are also damaging the environment.
Well, part of the building paradigm
Yes.
that has been in the Caribbean for a very long time is that with the building of hotels and so on, they like to build them along the coast. Because we market the destination as though you step out of your bedroom and you step onto the beach.
Time for a new marketing plan.
But and that's creates a problem when it comes to disaster management.
It creates a problem when it
and so
comes
on.
to survivability. We are destroying the environment at the same time. You're putting yourself at known risk because it's no longer unknown. You know there is a risk. For instance, I think based on the maps that we have again, that Sandy Point, I think will become completely inundated in the event of that 100-foot wave we were referring to. Completely inundated. And Bastia too. So we are saying, there's a nice beach there. I love the beach in Sandy Point. But guess what? If I'm going to die by building a house there, I just won't.
Okay.
That's all.
Now you are touching on something, of course, which is we are much more aware of today, and that is how our climate is changing and how it is affecting the environment, and the result of that is that we are seeing more frequent and severe natural disasters. So we have to be aware of our environment. And we have to look at how we are treating our environment. So we have to be responsible global citizens in terms of how we treat the environment. Because we don't treat the environment well, it comes back to bite us.
I wouldn't say that we have to because we don't. I would say we ought to.
We ought to.
Yes. I agree.
And
we have to shoulder the responsibility, that's why.
yes.
We have to.
And I think that really brings me to my last question before we go, because we are out of time. What role does NEMA play in training for disaster management?
Pero, you want to go ahead and...
We play the lead role. We do not. I remember there used to be a commercial years ago that I used to watch. It went like this: we don't make the clothes, but we make the clothes better.
I see.
We do not train ourselves necessarily. Well, in the case of our NDC, he has that capacity. However, we have access to resources, and we make those available primarily to our volunteers. Of course, we don't pay them in money, but at the end of it all, they will be so well trained that they will be able to go anywhere and command any salary, I believe, with anything that has to do with disaster management, based on the training that they would have access through collaboration with the NEMA. So we provide training, we source that training for everyone. As I said to you, the CDM Youth Ambassadors received training before the group was even launched. We started to train them, first aid and that sort of CPR and that sort of thing. And Abdias being one of the lead trainers in the region, I'm sure he has something to add.
Well, what we want to do, let's say, I want St. Kitts to be one of the most resilient. I'm a competitor. I want St. Kitts and Nevis to be one of the most resilient Caribbean islands in the Caribbean. I want us to have sort of strong business continuity plan. I want us to be able to come from danger to safety in short time, but with a long-term specific. You understand? To build better.
Right.
How can we do that? By capacity building.
Right.
I want to make sure that all of our volunteers, all of our stakeholders, partners, are trained in the various areas. Damage assessment. I want them trained in shelter management. I want them trained in incident command systems. I want them trained in how to handle hazardous materials. I want them trained in search and rescue. I want them trained in many other areas that they can understanding the comprehensive disaster management cycle and methodology. So all these areas are we're looking into. For example, I want Vesta to be the best PRO in the Caribbean region. So if we have a competition, she has to raise St. Kitts Nevis flag to the highest.
Oh yeah.
Good. Okay, and with that said, I want to thank both of you.
Yes.
Thank you.
For being on today's program.
And that's why if you only miss, sorry, I don't want to
go ahead.
I cannot allow this program to end without acknowledging, as I said before, and I emphasize it to my staff, is only 9 to 10 of us with a responsibility so huge that I have to acknowledge our volunteers, my district managers, assistant managers, the CDM youth ambassadors, all of our subcommittee chairs, and in particular my staff, starting with Sandra, our cleaner, our receptionist, Anthea, my PRO who is here, my deputy NDC who is Stella, also my technician Lejan, and also acknowledging Jacinth, who senior clerk, has been there with us forever, and she has a lot of we also Shanice Allen, who is with us, and our district coordinator, and my driver, our driver, Mr. Patrick. So I just wanted to acknowledge all of them and thank them for the commitment to work and bringing us from danger to safety.
Certainly. Well, thank you so much for Vesta. Thank you, of course, for being our program. Next week, and Mr. Samuel,
yes, sir.
We will be back with another edition of Working for You. I am Les Roy Williams. Until then, continue to remain vigilant, because we want you not to be in danger, but to be safe in terms of environmental disasters. See you next week. Stay up to date with news, programs, and activities of the government with SKNIS. Like us on Facebook. Listen to us on SoundCloud. Follow us on Twitter. And watch our videos on YouTube. Connect with us today. SKNIS, St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service.